getting ready to make a fire. I'm gonna do some fire for cooking because obviously it's hot here in the Ozarks and it's the middle of the day, but I do wanna cook up some victuals, some campfire food always tastes better, so I wanna do that. So I thought I'd show you a little different fire lay, and this is one I'll typically use just to establish a good bed of coals to cook over. It's not particularly a warm fire, although you could make it that way, but I really like fires that kind of incorporate everything together. And what I mean by that is, you know, when I think of establishing a fire, you know, minus the red gas can, which is also known as the redneck tinder bundle, no offense to anyone, you know, you're starting with your smallest material and you're working your way all the way up to your sustaining fuel. So your smallest material is obviously your tinder, and that's where the heat, that's the rubber meets the road, that's where the heat meets the tinder, right? And I've got cedar bark in here, plenty of it, really good supply of that thanks to Ma Nature and the Ozarks here. But that's where it's going to start, and that's a really finite material. From there, it's going to transfer that heat to what I would consider smalls. All right, this is kindling. All right, kindling is basically, think of not green leaves. Basically, think of matchstick size all the way up to maybe magic marker size. So in between there, you've got pencils, but it's kind of a mix of really small stuff to gradually larger stuff, and that stuff's going to burn long enough to transfer to what I consider sustaining fuel. Kind of the first step in the sustaining fuel process is sticks that are thumb size or larger. All right, once these are burning, then I know my fire is going to sustain itself because this fuel will actually last for quite a bit of time. This will burn out quickly, but once I've transferred that heat to this, then I know that I'm in business. So I like to have a handful of those kind of larger size, thumb size and up. And most of the time for sustaining fuel, you know, I'm thinking, you know, that thumb size is that first, but that should burn long enough to actually transfer heat to gradually larger and larger material. And, you know, wrist size and up is really good sustaining fuel. That'll burn, you know, for quite some time without having to constantly feed it. So that whole system, rather than, you know, light the tinder, okay, let me add some matchstick size, let me add some pencil size, let me add some marker size, let's go on to the thumb size. Now let's start putting sustaining fuel on. Like, yes, that does work, but I like fire lays that kind of incorporate all of that to where I can just kind of set the conditions for a successful fire using all those principles. And once I apply, you know, my tinder bundle to it and some of these smalls, then it all kind of works together. So this particular fire lay is one example of that. This is called the log cabin fire lay, which if you look at the way it's constructed, I think you can see why. We've just got alternating logs here. You'll notice that I have the wider diameter, the thicker diameter logs are on the very bottom, and it gradually makes its way up and smaller in size. What I like about this is this gives me some structure for the outside, and it also has a tendency to start heating this fuel from the outside, and eventually this stuff will catch and I can just kind of collapse it towards the center and I'll get a good bed of hardwood coals. These particular logs, this sustaining fuel here is actually some white oak, it looks like. It's definitely an oak. Pretty sure it's a white, might be a red, but either way it's oak and it's a good hardwood. It's a really good sustaining fuel, and I like to cook over hardwood coals. So log cabin structure, you can build this as high as you want to build it, but you know, it's pretty dry around here. I've got a lot of dry grass around here that I'm going to have to keep an eye on until this bed, you know, basically beds down the coals. And you could take the time to clear that if you really wanted, but there's just a lot of it here. So, you know, chances are if it does catch, I'll just be able to stomp it right out and it'll be fine. So I'm not too worried about that, but if that's something you're worried about in your area, and if you're in a particularly dry area, especially, you want to clear out, you know, a good 3 foot radius at least all the way around. So it'd be like almost 9 feet around your fire. Big area. But here I'm not so worried about it. I'm not going to leave it, and I'm going to keep a good eye on it. And it's pretty wet and pretty humid here. So yeah, and I want this to kind of quickly die down into a bed of coals. So from here, what I can do is add a little bit to this. I'm going to take some of these smalls and this kind of open area here in the center. I'm going to put kind of a platform down because I don't want to put my tinder directly onto the ground. I want a little bit of a base there. but I'm not going to use too much. It's almost kind of like you've created a little wood stove here with a lot of aeration in it. So it's a good mix of matchstick all the way up to pencil, maybe marker size in here, and get those to a size to where they'll fit down in there pretty nicely. And don't worry about if the structure falls while you're doing it. It's not that big of a deal. And once it gets burning, you're going to be rolling that in anyway. Put a little more in there. I'll fill that box about halfway full. That's got a lot of life left in it there. That's pretty good. Just a little bit for underneath the tender bundle. Maybe a little more. That's pretty good. So my tender bundle, when it goes in, will go right on top of there, and then I'll cover it the rest of the way with some sticks. So I'm going to reserve these. Kind of put them off to the side, ready to go. And of course, my thumb size, this is like my first stage of sustaining fuel that's going to burn long enough to get these larger logs going. I'll reserve those as well. Put those to the side.